The year is 1925 and you are an explorer. You've heard stories from locals about a mysterious lost city deep in the Amazon rainforest, and you set off to find it. But something goes terribly wrong, and you vanish into the jungle never to be seen again. What happened? This is the story of the man who got lost in the Amazon. It's me. Welcome to my channel. And this is the story of Percy Fawcett. Or rather, it's the story of the man who may have been Percy Fawcett. Our story begins in 1867, when Alfred Russel Wallace, one of the fathers of the theory of evolution, published a paper that would change everything. In this paper, Wallace discussed a region he'd explored in the Malay archipelago, where there was a clear division between fauna and flora on either side of a river. On one side of the river, the animals and plants were more closely related to those found further south, and on the other side, they were more closely related to species found further north. This suggested that the river was a barrier that prevented species from interbreeding and evolving together. Wallace named this phenomenon the Wallace Line, and it provided one of the first pieces of evidence for evolution. But Wallace's work had an unintended consequence. His writings inspired explorers to go out and discover similar lines dividing animal and plant species across the globe. One such explorer was British explorer and cartographer Percy Fawcett. Fawcett believed that the world was full of these Wallace lines, and that each line represented a barrier that had prevented different groups of species from mixing and evolving together. Fawcett became convinced that there must be a similar line in the Amazon rainforest, and that it could help him uncover some of the secrets of the jungle. In 1906, Fawcett set off into the Brazilian and then Bolivian Amazon to find this line. But while exploring the jungle, he came across something even more interesting, strange ruins that seemed to be the remnants of a lost city. Fawcett was so excited by his discovery that he immediately began to plan his next expedition. He wanted to explore the ruins further and try to piece together the history of the lost city. Fawcett wasn't the only one excited by the discovery. People had been fascinated by the idea of a lost city in the Amazon for centuries. There were rumors of a place called El Dorado, a city of gold deep in the jungle, and many explorers had come to believe that it was real. When Fawcett discovered the ruins, he thought that he might have finally found it. There was only one problem, though. The people who lived in the city had disappeared. No one knew what had happened to them or why they had built such a great city only to abandon it. But Fawcett was determined to find out. He returned to the ruins again and again, but each time he did, he came away with more questions than answers. The more he explored the city, the more he realized that it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was clear that the city had been home to a thriving civilization, but no one knew where its people had gone or what had happened to them. As Fawcett explored the city, he began to piece together its history. He found artifacts that showed that the people who lived there had been highly skilled craftsmen. They had also been farmers, growing crops and raising animals. But Fawcett couldn't understand how a civilization so advanced could have simply vanished. He was convinced that there was more to the story, but he just didn't know what it was. As the years passed, Fawcett became more and more obsessed with the lost city. He pored over maps and documents trying to find any mention of it. He even traveled to Europe to study ancient texts and artifacts. But the more he learned, the more he realized that he was up against a brick wall. No one knew anything about the lost city. But Fawcett wasn't about to give up. He had come too far and spent too much time to quit now. So in 1925, Fawcett set off on his most ambitious expedition yet. He was determined to find the lost city once and for all. This time, Fawcett wasn't alone. He brought his son Jack with him, as well as several other explorers and guides. Together, they set off into the heart of the Amazon. As they journeyed deeper into the jungle, the explorers began to find more and more evidence of the lost city. They found ruins, artifacts, and even bones. But as they pressed on, the jungle grew thicker and the ruins began to decay. Finally, they reached the center of the jungle where they found the heart of the lost city. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The city was massive, with towering pyramids, temples, and palaces. Fawcett and his team explored the city, mapping its layout and collecting artifacts. But as they did, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They could have sworn they heard strange noises coming from the trees, and they saw strange shapes moving in the shadows. But when they tried to get closer, they could never actually see anything. As the days passed, the explorers became more and more convinced that they weren't alone in the jungle. They began to tell stories around the campfire, stories of the creatures that lurked in the darkness and the strange noises that echoed through the trees. But Fawcett refused to believe them. He was convinced that there was a scientific explanation for everything and that there were no creatures in the jungle that couldn't be explained away. But then one night, Fawcett was awakened in his camp by a strange noise. He sat up and listened intently. It was a low growl that seemed to be coming from the trees. Fawcett tried to convince himself that it was nothing, but then he saw it. A pair of glowing eyes peering at him from the darkness. Fawcett screamed and ran, but whatever was out there was faster. In a moment, the growling stopped, and there was silence. In the morning, Fawcett and his team searched the area, but they could find nothing. No tracks, no bones, no sign that anything had ever been there. Fawcett tried to convince himself that he had imagined the whole thing, but he couldn't. He knew that there was something out there watching them. As the days passed, the explorers became more and more afraid. They started to whisper among themselves, talking about the creature in the jungle and how to escape its grasp. Fawcett tried to keep order, but it was difficult. Everyone was on edge, and it seemed like any moment now they could be attacked. Finally, Fawcett and his team decided that they had had enough. They packed up their things and headed back to civilization. As they walked, they kept an eye on the trees, always expecting the worst. But nothing happened. As they emerged from the jungle, they were greeted by a sight that made them all gasp. The city they had found was gone. The pyramids, temples, and palaces had vanished. All that remained was a small clearing and a sense of unease. Fawcett and his team stumbled out of the jungle and into a small village. They were greeted by curious stares, but no one seemed to want to talk to them. Fawcett tried to ask about the city, but the villagers just shook their heads and whispered among themselves. Fawcett could tell that they knew something he didn't, but they weren't willing to share it. Fawcett and his team eventually made their way back to civilization, but they were never the same again. The experience in the jungle had taken a toll on them, and they never spoke of it to anyone. Fawcett died in 1927 without ever having solved the mystery of the lost city. But his story didn't end there. In 2009, a group of explorers set out to find Fawcett's lost city. They used his old journals and maps to guide them, and after months of searching, they found it. The city was in ruins, but it was real. The explorers were able to confirm that Fawcett had discovered a truly amazing place. But there was still one mystery that remained. What had happened to Fawcett and his son? The explorers searched the area, but they could find no trace of them. They never discovered what had happened to Fawcett and his son, but they did find something else. They found evidence that Fawcett had been right. There was something strange in the jungle, something that had driven him and his team mad. The explorers found strange carvings in the trees and mysterious symbols painted on rocks. They also found bones that didn't belong to any known species. The explorers were never able to solve the mystery of the lost city, but they did bring back evidence of something truly amazing. Percy Fawcett's story has inspired many books and movies, including The Lost City of Z starring Charlie Hunnam and Robert Pattinson. But the truth may be even stranger than fiction. What do you think happened to Percy Fawcett and his son? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other videos on the Amazon rainforest. Thanks for watching. See you next time.